Welcome back, folks. You're listening to pixelprojectradio, a video game discussions and analysis podcast. My name is Rick. Hello, I'm the host, and today we descend into Hallownest to explore a history sunk in time through Hollow Knight, the 2017 Metroidvania that took the scene by storm. Up top, as always, even in the new year of 2026, I've got to thank the patrons. The patrons are the folks who keep this train chugging along on the tracks, and if you want to be like these fine locomotists, conductors, or whatever you'd like to call them, you can check out patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. You can find all of our stuff on offer there, and we're going to talk all about that at the end of the episode with plugs. Let me introduce the co-host for today's episode. I'm joined once again by Doug from Nostalgium Arcanum and Playing by Ear. How's it going, Doug?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. This game is very near and dear to my heart, so I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Absolutely. I can see why. It is, I had a great time. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I had a terrific time with this game. There's so much to talk about, and it's going to be fantastic. So if you are new to the podcast, first of all, welcome. We're glad that you're here. What Pixel Project Radio is it's generally a narrative analysis podcast in which we go through a game, such as Clair Obscur, Final Fantasy Tactics, things like that, and discuss the plot beat by beat. In most cases, narrative plays out pretty similarly to like books or films or theater or whatever. The story goes from the beginning to the end. But this game, Hollow Knight, is a little bit different. This is the first game on the show that is entirely based in lore, where the story isn't always necessary. In fact, sometimes it's optional, as we're going to hear. To that end, we're not going to cover every bit of lore that would make for an extremely long show. I think there are shows probably, right, Doug, that do that in their entirety, I would assume.
Yeah, I've never seen one. I mean, I've seen other podcasts cover this game, but as you said, this is a game that draws heavily from the Dark Souls FromSoft school of storytelling, where a lot of the story is archaeological. It's environmental things, it's item descriptions, and you to put together the story, you're a little bit like the classic meme of Charlie Day at the corkboard for Pepe Sylvia.
Yeah.
Trying to piece all this stuff together. There are people who are much better at that than I, and much smarter than I at doing that. So when it comes to these types of games, I tend to rely on those folks, the other podcasters, the YouTubers, to give me tell me the shape of this generally. So once I kind of have it in mind, the story starts making sense. I can't put all the puzzle pieces together myself. That said, some of the story is experiential. Some of it is the what you find along the way as you tell your own story of making your way through Hallownest. Right. So it's both, but I would say, 80 to 90% of it is you finding out what already happened in this place, not what's going on in it now.
There's a little quote that I took from, there's a YouTuber named Mossbag that has a very well-beloved video in the community talking all about the lore of this game. And in the video, he said, quote, "The past 8 years," I've adjusted the number just to be current, "the past 8 years have seen an insane amount of research from the Hollow Knight community to make sense of Team Cherry's sprawling world," end quote. And that it is sprawling. It is all very well planned out, and their storytelling is very unique. We're going to talk all about that in a little bit. Take a shot every time your favorite podcaster says we'll get there. But just wanted to give that up front. So let's talk brief histories and overall thoughts on the game. Doug, you were the one that suggested this to me. You had learned that I was somewhat interested in it. You said, let's absolutely do that. So when did you first play this game? What's your relationship to it? Tell us a little bit about that.
I didn't play it at launch. It took a little while, obviously, for this game by an unknown team to gain some traction. But I am a fan of the Dark Souls, FromSoft series of games. And so when you follow other podcasts or, content creators that talk about those, this started to bubble up to the surface in 2017, 2018 as something to take note as a 2D Souls-like. And it definitely borrows some elements from that game series, although many of them are things that series borrowed from earlier Metroidvanias. I've been playing Metroidvanias since the original Metroid itself. This genre's been around forever. It seemed intriguing. And then just once you lay eyes on it, you kind of go like, well, I have to at least experience what this is, just because
Yeah.
it's so the aesthetics are so off the chart. And so I started playing it, and all of its reputation immediately, I was like, well, this is well earned. And by the end of it, I was I can confidently say I think this is one of the best Metroidvanias ever made, if not the best. And that even includes its sequel, Silk Song, which I think is not quite as good as the original for reasons that may or may not come up. It's still very, very good, but I think this tops it. And it does so many different things and does them all really well in a really cohesive way that is just, I will play other games and I'll have like, as we all do, kind of our list of a backlog of things you want to get to. And every once in a while, I'll kind of hit the speed bump of going like, I should play that other thing, but I could play Hollow Knight again. That it's always kind of there tempting me. So I love it. This is just I think this is a really impressive piece of software.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to echo a lot of what you said. I had that same feeling. I was speaking with you as I went through the game the first time. I started this a while ago because I wanted to get ahead of it. I knew it was a long game, and I am not a Metroidvania person. I don't have a lot of experience with them. I've never played. The only Metroid game I've ever played is 2 on the Game Boy when I was a kid, so I didn't know what I was doing. I'm a newcomer to this genre, so having you here as a veteran is going to be particularly exciting to get the coalescence of our 2 views. I had very much the same experience. I was playing through this game. It hooked me almost immediately, just let's not bury the lead. And I had so many instances of like, yeah, I really need to play more Nier Automata, but Hollow Knight is so good. and at the time of recording this, I'm already into a new playthrough. It is that good. It is so much fun. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about it, you and I. We're not going to talk about the DLC too much. Neither of us have played it yet. I considered trying. I didn't want to rush through it and, just have not so good of a time.
I have played the one of the DLCs. I don't think I beat it. And then the others I have not. I didn't get around to. So I can't speak too confidently on those. And even though you say you haven't played a lot of Metroidvanias, I would wager you're wrong. In that this is such a foundational, like, core design philosophy for games. Even if you haven't played anything that's literally, this, like, here's a 2D labyrinth, go find items to increase your ability to explore the labyrinth. You've seen things that are very influenced by this. I mean, there's plenty of like, so I'll give you an example, like, what was God of War Ragnarok, for example. Like, Is it a Metroidvania? No, but you are still doing a lot of like finding items to unlock paths that you couldn't do before and backtracking to do those things. So like, even though it wouldn't, no one would call that game a Metroidvania, like those kinds of concepts have become so firmly embedded in what game design is, at least in any kind of, action game that's not, say, a puzzler or something like that. You are experiencing things that draw from this, even if it's not, again, Symphony of the Night or something else.
That makes sense. And my understanding too, I've heard a lot of folks familiar with the genre say that Hollow Knight is in some ways a distillation of all of the purities that make a Metroidvania, Metroid a Hollow Knight. It's definitely all of the things that make a Hollow Knight. I meant to say a Metroid or a Castlevania or such. I have a section where we can talk about genre and difficulty if we'd like to. Mm-hmm. Before we do, I'd like to hear from the community, from our community forum. If you're new to the show, the community forum is a channel in the Discord server, which is free, that you can join and give your thoughts on the games that we're playing. And we've got 3 today. First, we've got Egg Salad Jr., first responder. Here's what they say. I love this game. The haunting and beautiful music pairs wonderfully with the art to create an atmosphere. The game just felt amazing to be in, with something new and interesting around every corner. The first playthrough, I felt like I was following a critical path the developers had laid out, but subsequent playthroughs reveal that there are several different paths through Hallow Nest. Each area connects to several others in ways that are sometimes surprising. And for me, the combat felt very well tuned, though some bosses did take me upwards of an hour. The movement controls felt responsive and smooth as well, which made even some of the more difficult platforming challenges very fun to accomplish. Also, as an old Morrowind enjoyer, I will always appreciate a game that lets you use giant bugs as an in-game fast travel system. Like they say in Vardenvel, why walk when you can ride? Oh yeah, the critical path I think I have that noted later on in the design philosophy area, so I'll hold my tongue on that one. Next, we've got Dave Jackson, Tales from the Backlog host. Here's what Dave says. This is a masterpiece. New areas and abilities are teased while you follow the paths available to you, always planting that seed for when you do get some kind of upgrade. And that's a feeling I wish I could bottle up. Getting a double jump and going back to all of those previously inaccessible areas, for example. And speaking of those upgrades, Hollow Knight sets a high bar for them. They're not just keys, quote unquote, but fundamental changes to your toolkit for both combat and platforming. The boss fights are incredibly well designed, difficult but fair, with clear chances for you to heal or counterattack. The art is gorgeous, the soundtrack absolutely rules, and for the sake of brevity, I'll cut it there and say Hollow Knight was my favorite Metroidvania ever until Silksong came around. And then you get the stinger, dun dun dun.
Yeah, actually, I was as we're recording this, Dave just released his episode on Silksong, and so I was chatting with him over Discord, and we were talking about our shared love of this series. He's right. I mean, everything about this game it doesn't do anything new as Metroidvanias go. Right? You can look at there's so many of them that came before this. That you can kind of go, well, Hollow Knight doesn't do anything original, at least in terms of the mechanics. And that might be true, but it does them extremely well. And it's like, maybe it's not a question of being innovative. It's just a matter of being very thoughtful in how you apply all of the lessons you can glean from this game's predecessors.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it with the last community forum correspondence. Keaton, as always, is providing a succinct, pithy, and thought-provoking response. He says, as I approach my birthday next week, I reflect upon the thoughts of the last stag. Quote, I tire so easily now, and my old legs seem to ache more and more. Still, I'm lucky to grow old at all. So many others haven't. And that is a distillation of the lore of this game, if I've ever heard one. So let's stop beating around the bush. Let's talk about Hollow Knight. This game was released in 2017 on PC. It came to consoles the year after. Developed and published by Team Cherry. Designed by Ari Gibson and William Pellin. Ari is the art. Pellin, along with David Kazdi, was the programmer, one of the programmers. Composed by Christopher Larkin, who had done Hacknet and Outfolded, but otherwise some TV stuff, some commercial stuff, and Silksong. So, this game was birthed at the Ludum Dare Game Jam in 2013. And even had our little guy, he's called the Knight. I've just written him as our little guy throughout here, as the protagonist. This was originally titled Hungry Knight back then, and it did not get good reviews at all at that game jam.
Yeah, you can see some of the early footage or like images from this like prototype version of the game, and it's like a marvel how far it came from where it started.
Oh yeah. And it's funny too, game jams have given us some really incredible games. The only other one that I can think of off the top of my head is Celeste, but I don't know. I for some reason I'm thinking Animal Well came out of that, but I don't think that's true. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think it did, but I mean, Animal Well is notable again as another like very small team does something. I think that was a team of one, basically playing Animal Well, doing a dazzling thing in this genre, both visually and just mechanically. I think the two games speak to each other in certain ways.
Absolutely. And since you had brought up a couple of times just now and before the idea of Metroidvanias, let's talk about that a little bit. I have a couple of sections here in the notes to talk about difficulty and also some of the genre influences that are within this game. So let's talk that for a second. Let's talk genres. This game, there are kind of three pieces of DNA that make up this game that I've seen bandied about the most. That's platforming, the mechanical upgrades and explorations that make this a Metroidvania, and then the difficulty of the combat and mechanics and boss fights that make it sort of like a Souls-like. To me, when I hear this, I'm thinking, yeah, it's all three. It doesn't have to be one, but there are some passionate arguments online that say, no, it's not one of these. It is only these two, or no, it's actually only this one, or no, it's not any of them. It's not pure enough to be any of them. What do you think of that?
I find people who think categorization is the hill to die on very strange.
Oh yeah.
That's like, no, it has to be, and they get very like, rigid about like, it's this or it's that. It's like, who gives a shit? It's a fun game. Like, just play with it.
It's like, do you know that painting? I think it's like Sunday in the Park or something, that pointillism painting that's just an entire scene made up of individual little dots. It's like there's
George Seurat. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. It's like they're standing so close to it. They're examining every pixel, every dot to say like, oh, well, this isn't uniform, blah, blah, blah. But they're not actually seeing the whole picture. They're not looking at the game for what it is.
Yeah, I will say that to the extent it can be categorized, it's more Metroidvania than anything else. I mean, it's, if you've played Super Metroid and, the pillars of this genre, like it's definitely one of those. It's
Yeah.
You couldn't say it isn't. It does borrow some Souls elements, the mechanic where you die and then you can recover some of your resources from the spot where you died. That's a Souls thing. The way the lore is doled out is kind of Souls style, as we already said. But just the idea of like, hey, this game has some difficulty, therefore it's a Souls game. Like, that's a little tenuous to me. But
yeah,
I think it's a good amalgam of both. It's, if you want to call it a Souls like, that's fair. But the bottom line is mechanically, the key thing is platforming and exploration. That's way more important than anything else in the game, at least mechanically. This game for me lives and dies kind of in the hands. Like, how does it feel?
Yes.
Especially here where you've got this in your notes, like the movement of the knight is so finely tuned. He is a joy to play, like in terms of just bouncing this guy around Hallownest. Especially where this is really important for a Metroidvania, because intrinsic to this genre is a lot of backtracking. So if getting around is a chore, you're never going to finish that game. You're going to put the controller down and say like, I have to go all the way back across the map, even with fast traveling, no way. But here it's like, yeah, sure, let me go. Like, I'm going to, I get to bounce around on stuff and whack enemies that are all cute and have fun exploring while keeping my eye on the edges of the map for places I can push against it.
And that's something that I've traditionally been susceptible to in video games, that like backtracking. And one of the reasons that I have kind of not avoided Metroidvanias, but they're never like first on my list, is backtracking to me often feels very tedious, as you said. And it's something I would prefer not to do. But so many things about the visuals, the score, and the general level design and philosophy of this game made that not at all a tenuous experience. The art style, for example, absolutely beautiful. It's cartoon adjacent, I would say. And this isn't like a hill that I'm willing to die on or anything, but there's this look to a lot of indie games that feels very samey to me, with some exceptions, obviously, but I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but Hollow Knight is different. They could have made this a retro, quote unquote, game, like looking game, pixel art. Thank goodness they didn't. The style to me, like, I don't know. It's like this, I'm just going to read what I wrote. It's like this perverted blend of like comic books, early animation, and Tim Burton. Like, I don't know. It looks so unique to me. They don't try to do too much in terms of like blending or hyper detail. Things stand out when they need to stand out. You're never losing your little guy in the background, for example. And part of how they do that too, I wonder if you've seen this video, Doug, there's a great video on YouTube by Juniper Dev who talked about the layers of this game. And I wonder if friend of the show and artist Phil from Deleted Saves would have anything to say about this. But they use layers in this game across the different locales as a way to sort of suggest implicitly to you that this is a 3D environment, even though it's on a 2D plane. When you're moving, you can see the layers of the bushes in the foreground, for example, sort of move with you at a different pace and sort of reveal what was behind them that you couldn't see when you were right there, or similarly for stuff in the background. It's one of those things that's difficult to describe, which is a quality you love in podcasters, but when you see it, it's like, oh, wow. I don't know. I think what I wrote here is, how did I both notice that and not notice it? It's striking.
Yeah, they're using techniques that are like classic 2D Disney stuff for the way the animation works, right? You've got this very kind of clear popping foreground of inked animated characters and objects in the environment against these painterly things that are also part of like the first foreground layer, and then more again, painted watercolor things that are slightly blurrier, for example, in the background. And they use a little bit of parallax to suggest, motion and that just that hint of third dimension. And it's all unbelievably beautiful. It's kind of Disney technique without necessarily the Disney house style. Like you said, you're picking up on like things like Tim Burton's aesthetic, or like even things like Fleischer, like older cartoonists. Your stuff from the 30s even. So it's not Cuphead. It's not cool. It's not that, cartoony in that way. It's not like everything's an anthropomorphic, thing with googly eyes. It's more melancholy and subdued than that. But still, all of the characters, everything's really cute and kind of chibi as these little bug characters, because almost everything you meet is a bug or something roughly the size of a bug. And like it is like you've got to just go look at, not still images doesn't even do it justice. You almost have to see it in motion, because it is unbelievably beautiful in a way that's like only 2D can do. Like 2D animated stuff. Like this is one of the best looking games you'll ever play now. It's one of the best looking games you could play 50 years from now because of this. It will not age. It will continue to look absolutely stellar. So yeah, play it on the biggest screen you can. And just take it all in.
Yeah, it's like Wind Waker in that way. Well, it's not like Wind Waker insofar as it wasn't derided when it came out, but it's going to age extraordinarily gracefully, or maybe not even at all, like you suggested. You had mentioned the melancholy. That's a huge part of both the lore, but also what went into the level design, the design philosophy, and the score, which I'm excited to talk about. There is, even when you see the really cute stuff, like when you mentioned like the cute little chibi, I went to the grubs immediately. There are these little grubs that serve as collectibles throughout the game. They look like fat little cute caterpillars, and they make these cute little sounds whenever you find them. Even them, seeing them there trapped in those little jars that you break, they're never surrounded by like you feel good to rescue them, but then you're immediately drawn back into the world. Like this is bleak. We're in memories of the past, like a dead, decaying world. Even when you find all of the grubs and you go up with the grand grub or the papa grub, and they're all there, they're all cheering you on. You look around, it's still a desolate, broken world. You are still sort of living in the memories of the past, and that atmosphere, that air, doesn't go away. Not we're gonna not spoil things until the quote unquote spoiler section, which is going to be kind of hazy and vague in this episode anyway. But it doesn't go away. There is no happy ending. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, this is more of a story thing, but this idea of a world in decline. I mean, this is again, pure FromSoft, right? Every FromSoft game is like, this place was grand once, and then a corrupting force came in, and now you're experiencing it as everything is in disrepair. Everyone is losing their minds. Everything is slowly falling to this corruption. I mean, so that's nothing new for this genre. It's done very well here, but what makes it interesting is whereas FromSoft will use that as license for full-blown horror, absolute, terrifying shit, absolute, sometimes goofy things, but generally still in the vein of horrifying or very, very weird. Here, they're balancing it with a cuteness, right? And so It's a really neat tightrope for them to still get across all of this kind of very sad, melancholy tone with these bright-eyed kind of bug characters that are doing their best to maintain while the world around them falls apart. It's a great tightrope, and they walk it so well.
They really do. It's there's so many things that they do really well here. And speaking of that, this was mentioned in one or two of the community forum correspondence. But there's a critical path in games. And my understanding is that this took some inspiration from Dark Souls in this respect too. There is a suggested path in this game, I think. There is a path that a lot of new players are going to take in roughly the same order. But you don't have to do that, not even a little bit. And you don't even have to usurp that path, quote unquote critical path, by cheesing the game. You can. There are areas you can do that, but there's so much freedom given to you. But speaking of tight ropes, it's not overwhelming that you might get in, I don't know, some other big open world game, The Witcher 3. I don't know if that holds up, but that's what I thought of. I was actually, I was thinking of Fallout New Vegas recently, and that game corrals you through, like it puts its hand on your shoulder and leads you in a horseshoe path, like up to New Vegas, and it prevents you from going straight there, like in a straight shot as the crow flies, by placing these insane death claws that you're just not going to surmount, like almost certainly not. This game is closer to that than not, but it still didn't feel that prescriptive to me. I never felt like there was, with the exception of a few areas that you just absolutely cannot get through because you need like an upgrade like the Shade Cloak or the Monarch Wings or something. With the exception of those, like I felt like I could go anywhere, and I felt like it wanted me to go anywhere, and it was encouraging me to go anywhere. Like, hey, as long as you can, dodge and hit, go for it. That is a really freeing feeling, and starting up a new playthrough, it was exciting because like, yeah, I could either retrace my steps and see stuff that I missed, or I could do something a completely different way. I can play maybe a bit more aggressively this time than defensively.
Yeah, I think the best Metroidvanias do this. That's the fun, is you're not exploring in a linear way, but there will be areas that are gated to some degree by an upgrade item you need, right? But it won't be just a path to that upgrade directly, although there is one, obviously, if you know where to go. What the intended experience is, you will wander around, and as you wander around the area that is available to you, you will inevitably find things that expand the radius of where you can go. And again, you by looking at your map, thinking where have I been, where have I not been, and maybe now that I've gone a little farther, I might, if I went back over there, be able to go farther in that direction than I could before. And that is, when Metroidvanias work, that is the magic that makes them work, is that feeling that exploration is worthwhile. Right. Even though exactly, you can't go anywhere. So the world kind of unfolds to you in sort of batches of areas. Again, once you get an upgrade, now all of a sudden, maybe not just one area path is open to you. Now maybe there's like 3 paths you could now go down that lead to other things. And so can you break the game? Not really. I mean, these developers are really good in saying, like, to the extent you think you're breaking the game, I mean, they've allowed you to. They know exactly where you can go and where you can't go, even if you're, pretty clever about it.
Yeah, and the fact that they're such a small team makes that all the more impressive. They really thought this through down to the minutia. It's really incredible. And you had mentioned that the exploration always feels rewarding when it's new, and that the different areas are batched out to you. And I think that's largely because, at least to me, this is virtually fat-free. I cannot think of a single area or path or idea or aesthetic that just feels superfluous. Everything here is either visually exciting, mechanically exciting, auditorily exciting, although that's usually the case throughout all of this, or exciting for lore reasons. Everything, and there is no path either that just feels like, why did I have to, this path is worthless. No, everything is work. I mean, 99% fat free, less sodium than ever, 100 calories. It's great. Well, 1,000 calories, 1,000,000 calories. This is dense.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this one of the better Metroidvanias is that there are some, I can't think of any that specifically come to mind, where you go down some path a long way and you've done all this exploration and you find some very minor useless upgrade, like that, and that's it. Like, this game doesn't really have too many long winding paths that have dead ends. Generally, you find a circuitous route that will drop you back to some other place. So things are not, in other words, it's not a bunch of cul-de-sacs. Everything is kind of these connecting routes. And they've thought really hard, as you said, about making sure that they fill all of those things with interesting gameplay, interesting things to find, either mechanically or lore-wise. As you said, there's no fat here. And again, that's why I'm saying, like, it's not that it's doing anything new, but it's doing everything right. And
Yeah.
it just feels so, it never feels bad to go explore something. You always find something worthwhile. And that's why you're always incentivized to do more exploring. You notice, hey, there's a little area on the map there that's not a wall. There's like a way to get through there somehow. Or, you know, as you go, you know, you're noticing like, you know, I never looked up there before. I wonder what's up there. And you go, and inevitably there's usually something. They're very, very good about just throwing out those breadcrumbs to you and rewarding you when you follow them.
Or, hey, why is that me over there on that other side of the cave? What am I doing there?
Mm-hmm.
That moment really got me. Speaking of things that this team does really well, things that they do right, let's talk mechanics. You had alluded to this earlier. I have this written, and I told you, I'm pretty sure, in completely explicit terms. The controls are phenomenal. Some of the best that I've ever felt in a game that requires platforming and action. I mean, it's tough to compare this to like Celeste, because Celeste doesn't have quote unquote combat. But the first thing that you notice, for example, descent in this game is important. I wouldn't call it like a thematic idea, but you are always descending. You're descending literally into the depths of the earth. You are descending into the memories of the past, into a forgotten kingdom. You know, you are never, in some ways, you are never moving forward. You're always moving back. Even when you're learning new things, it's because you're going back into the history. It's fascinating. But as you're falling, let's talk about keeping it in the hands, like you said. Pause. When you're falling, you press left and right. You can just steer that way. You steer like on a dime. When you stop on a dime. When you jump and slash, it's so responsive. And the result of this is a sort of nakedness that anything that you're doing, any platforming, any fighting, whatever, it is you. It is your skill. You're not fighting against physics. You're not fighting against hit animations or startup animations. No, it is just all the barrier between player input and animations on the screen is virtually non-existent. It's masterful.
Yeah, it's real tight. I mean, in a way that's like basic NES platforming, like, and I mean that as a compliment. Like, you know, if you go back and play, like, I don't know, Mega Man 2, you know, some classic like that, like this is as responsive as that ever was. Like it's absolute perfect movement. You always feel like you can put the knight where you want to put him. And if something goes wrong with you trying to move him somewhere, it's never one of the things of like, this game is stupid, it doesn't work. It's like, no, it's me. I made the error. You know, you feel like you are fully in control. And it's not like it's a particularly complex set of moves. I mean, you add things. So, for example, you as with all Metroidvanias, you get movement upgrades. There's eventually a double jump, although like they interestingly keep the double jump from you until fairly late in the game, which is usually that's one of the like that's usually an early Metroidvania power up you get. Like, all right, when am I going to get this double jump already? They they know you're thinking that, and they held it back. But you get like a wall jump that allows you to stick to walls and then bounce off of them to get height. You know, all of these different little moves that, midair dash, the kinds of things you expect to get, but they all work really well. And you just feel like, I am, when I think it, my hands do it and the knight does it. Like you just feel fully integrated into this motion, and getting him around the little labyrinth always feels good. Even when the game asks you to do some tougher platforming challenge, it's never that bad. There's one area in the game where they demand some real Celeste style platforming perfection. But by and large, you're not always being asked to do something that complicated or that, with that little margin of error. But you can, and you can do all kinds of great things as this knight, because the base control set is so perfectly tuned.
And even when they do ask that really difficult stuff from you, when they're trusting you to push your limits, and I'm intentionally phrasing that in a way that will come back later, when they're asking that of you, it's always telegraphed and explained in a way such that your success can be guaranteed. Nothing is impossible. They don't throw anything new at you that you have to just learn. Everything is building upon what's come before. There's there I don't know if this is going to make a ton of sense, but there's this concept in teaching called spiral learning. And it's a teaching philosophy wherein if you think of like a spiral going up, like a coil, you are going up, but you're always circling back around to the front. If the front is like right in front of your eyes, meaning that as you learn new things, you're always coming back to reinforce what you've learned before. And that kind of is embodied in this game. They are never just throwing stuff at you to try it in this one place and then you never do it again. Everything is constantly building onto itself, and it creates this momentum of, yeah, we're asking you to do this difficult thing, but we've taught you and we've taught you well, and we know you can do it. So do it. Whether it's something simple, like the simple platform challenges, like jumping, double jumping, and dashing, or the really tough ones. You said NES, and what's the first thing I thought of? DuckTales. There's a quote unquote hidden mechanic in here that's pogoing. Oh, that is so fun. I love it. And it's tough, but man, yeah, NES is right. That was a great call.
Well, I'm glad they brought in the pogoing from DuckTales, honestly, because it's a great mechanic in that game. And I think it had been sort of dormant. It came back in Shovel Knight, which is really great. And, they use it here as well. There's plenty of places where you need to bounce off something. And all you have to do is, press down and then slash your sword and you'll bounce. And right. You'll get pretty good at that pretty quickly, but it allows you to, make your way through pits of spikes. And, they might put a series of what are essentially balloons in some kind of a path. You might have to bounce from one to one, to get somewhere. And it seems like the kind of thing that should be daunting, but once you've done it enough times, like anything else, it becomes second nature, and it's really, really fun.
Yeah. And you know what? Speaking of the pogoing, I'm curious what you think about this. One of my favorite ways they designed the movement and the mechanics of this is that even though they kept extremely tight controls, hairline tight controls, there is still knockback. When you hit an enemy, you are going to be pushed back just a little bit. When an enemy hits you, you're going to be pushed back just a little bit. When you pogo, obviously, you're going to be pushed back. But if you jump and hit something in front of you, you're going to be pushed back too. There are a lot of people that don't like this. A lot of like high level players that don't like this, so much so that the Team Cherry actually anticipated this and put in a charm that takes that away. I kind of feel the exact opposite. Like, I think this adds, Hollow Knight feels weightless because it is so pristinely controlled, like with such precision it's controlled. It makes it have this sense of weightlessness, and having that knockback keeps just enough weight to make it feel satisfying and to make it feel challenging, I think. I don't know. I tried playing with that charm that takes that away, and I know I'm just qualifying here with a judgment call, but it felt like a worse game to me, marginally, like a little bit worse of a game mechanically. I think it's a brilliant choice to keep that in there.
I agree. I like the knockback. First of all, it's not a lot of knockback, right? When you slash at an enemy and you get this very slight pushback, to me, it feels, it makes things feel more tactile, that you're really hitting it and it's pushing you back. Yeah. I did play around with the charm that eliminates it. I think for me, that's a use case where maybe there's a boss or something where the knockback is a problem and you need to turn it off. But by and large, I found that when I turned it off, I started to lose that sense of like, I know what my character is going to do at any given moment. It made me feel like I should be moving back now. It felt weird. So no, I'm in the camp that it doesn't bother me at all. And I like I said, I was playing with the game for so long and it was always there that it just became part of feeling like, well, this is just how it works. And you just build that into your play style.
And you can make an argument too that if you can learn to feel the knockback, you can learn to feel without it. That's valid. That's valid. And ultimately you should just play however you want to, because this game is so much more than just mechanics. That's a large part of it, but it's so much more than that. But I don't know, that I saw arguments about that a little bit. Another podcast I like, Kane and Rince, they talked about this quite a bit. I like it. I'm a fan. I like that kind of thing. You and I had alluded to a lot of different mechanics, the pogoing, the nails, the double jump, the charms. So let's just talk about those just a little bit. Some of it we don't need to spend as much time on. The nail is your basic attack, you slash. The jump, you jump, can you believe it? But let's talk about the charms for a second, since we had just mentioned that. These are like equipable. I was so surprised that they included this. These are like little equipable things, charms, appropriately named, that you equip them in open slots. You gain more slots as you go on. Each charm costs a certain number. I don't remember exactly what it's called. They have a cost. You have 5, a charm might cost 2, for example. And each charm is going to give a different technique or a different aesthetic or a different property to your character. For example, there is a charm that gives you a compass. I think that charm should have just been included. But there's also a charm that lets you emit thorns when you take a hit, and that damages enemies. There is a charm that lets you hit faster or harder. There is a charm that lets you turn into a bug and crawl around while you're gathering soul, which is another mechanic. These are cool because suddenly you can do entirely different play styles on different playthroughs. You can be more aggressive or defensive, or you can just have some real weird stuff. I was shocked this was here. This is so expressive.
I mean, this is them importing Dark Souls again, right? Because in a Souls game, you would typically have ring slots. You'd start with 2, and then you usually get, through the course of the game, you can earn up to 4, and each ring would again adjust the properties of your character in some way. And that's one of the ways those games have of letting you adapt your character to your particular playstyle, and or build your character in such a way that it's optimized for a particular boss or challenge. And so they do that here. Now here you can upgrade your nail by making it tougher, but you don't really get new weapons. You don't get like better armor. You can get more health. But you're not adjusting, like, again, in a Souls game, you've got 50 million different swords and shields and armors and helmets and stuff to choose from. That's how those games allow you to make those kinds of fine-tune adjustments. Here, they do it all through the charm system. And I think you start with 3 slots, and I think you can go up to something like 9 or 10. And what's different here is that the charms have different values. So like the compass, for example, that you mentioned, that uses up 1 slot, but there are others that maybe have more high value that might use up 3 whole slots. And so you have to decide, like, is having this particular thing worth losing some of the other 2? And you have to kind of make those judgment calls as to which ones you're going to equip and when. You also can only change them at what are benches, your checkpoints. So you can't change them on the fly either. You have to kind of change them when you decide you really need them. But yeah, this is how you can make your character do all kinds of different things. Most of these adjustments are, they're not radical. They generally don't overhaul your character, but they can make a big difference, especially situationally.
Oh, absolutely. Like if you know, for example, you've got a tough fight coming up, or if you know because you've lost several times to a tough fight, you can go back to a bench, because on benches where you save, that's the only time you can change charms. You can, which helps to not make it seem trivial, I think. But you go back to a bench, you switch up your charms, spec it for that fight to make it easier for you, and then respec once you're out. I mean, at another bench. I did this a lot, in particular in the Colosseum. The 3rd round of which is an absolute bear, total endurance test. But you can do that. Like, I think there was one other boss that I did that on, and I want to say it was Broken Vessel, that I was having a bit of trouble with. So I went back, I respec'd my my guy, and then, it helped me through it. One that I also quite liked is you get this charm. It's a low cost one that lets you emit a stinky odor that will do minor damage to enemies that come near you. So like if it's just a tiny little enemy and it comes near you, like one of the smallest flies, it might just die from the stinky aroma. But I also like that too, because if you're wearing that, like I was, and you talk to various NPCs, they'll comment on it. They'll be like, what smells? Is that you? I forget his name. Like, is that you? I haven't spoken to you in so long. It's very good.
Yeah, that one makes you look like Pigpen from Peanuts. And
Yeah,
I had that
yeah,
one equipped a lot because, again, in some situations where you're thinking, I need to do as much damage per second as I can, it's like it doesn't do a lot. But if you're adding to the overall total, you want that on. Or, again, the thorns one, if I take a hit, you take a hit. Those kinds of things. And you can, again, the more slots you have, you can start stacking these things
yeah.
for added effects. And that gives you more, more options. And so you're highly incentivized to do what you need to do to get those extra slots. I think a lot of them you purchase from a merchant. Some of them you find. But yeah, those are super important to really changing up the feel of the game.
Yeah, yeah, and you can do it just for the fun of experimentation, or you can do it to help aid with the difficulty. And speaking of that, I think this will transition really well into a discussion on difficulty. This game does have a reputation for being very difficult. And now, granted, a lot of the most commonly mentioned things that are very, very tough are optional or DLC or otherwise hidden away, which in this game kind of has a nebulous meaning because a lot of things are hidden away. But when it comes to difficulty, I think so obviously the difficulty is split up in between mechanics, i.e. boss fights, and mechanics, i.e. EG, excuse me, I meant EG, or mechanics, e.g. platforming. The platforming is probably the easier of the two to talk about. I think overall it's easier than the boss fights. Really, the only platforming challenge that I found in the game was the White Palace. And just me personally, I thought it was the perfect difficulty. It was so much fun. It's as close to something like Celeste as you're going to get. But, platforming is an integral part of what makes Hollow Knight. But I thought, I didn't think that they asked you to do anything that was too egregious. And anything that was too egregious was often because you didn't have something that you probably needed. For example, there are a lot of really wide stretches of acid that you can't get across. And there's you can try to do it to pogo off of this enemy that's way just far out of reach, and you can try, but really you just kind of need this super dash ability. As far as the platforming goes, when it comes to difficulty, I thought it was mostly pretty tame.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with the platforming at all. I think, again, as you said, the White Palace is a late game optional area that's specifically designed for platform challenge. Now, granted, you have to surmount that challenge to get the quote unquote, true ending. Right. So that there is that, but most of the platforming challenges throughout the game, I don't think are that hard. And if as you said, if there's a spot where you're finding something insanely hard, chances are that's the game's way of telling you you need an upgrade for this. Because once you get the thing that allows you to swim in acid unharmed, it's trivial. So it's the game's way of telling you just don't do that. Go do something else and then come back when you have the key. So I didn't find the platforming challenges to be that bad. I also don't think the bosses, by and large, are that hard. Yes. But that currency spends, there's no exchange rate for that. And criticizing a game for being hard is a little like criticizing food for being spicy. It's so subjective that it doesn't really matter. I will say, though, that Silk Song is so much more challenging than Hollow Knight is. I mean, the bosses are, profoundly harder. The platforming, there's more areas that are difficult than here, that it kind of trivializes any difficulty discussion over the original game. So,
oh, wow.
The Silk Song is much harder. By leaps and bounds, to a degree, which is one of the reasons I think it's not quite as good, because it's I don't need every boss to be this hard. I got through it. It can be done, but sometimes having a boss that's a cakewalk can be fun. That's not a challenge is not the only form of fun that there can be. And in fact, sometimes just as long as the mechanical challenge is interesting and entertaining, the fact that you get through it on the first try, is not a knock against it. But looking at the original Hollow Knight, I didn't find it that challenging. I think it's by 80% of it is fairly breezy. And sometimes the challenge is just knowing where to go. And then the game is just telling you yeah, man, you got a map. Just look around at the spots you haven't been yet and try that. So you know where to go. Or you have an idea of where you can go and maybe find something new. So I don't find this game to be that profoundly difficult. I mean, if you're new to platforming, or if you're not as experienced in
Sure.
this, sure. But if you've put in some time playing video games, this should be accessible to you.
I want to go back to what you said about the bosses not being difficult. Okay, so two things. One, I agree. I don't think, by and large, how do I want to phrase this? I guess it depends on how you define difficult. And what I mean by that is every boss, every enemy, every boss is explicit, as true to that word as you can be. Explicit in how it teaches you to handle it. I'm thinking back, so I'm not, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be a braggart. I don't consider myself, quote, good at games. There were 2 bosses only that gave me trouble in this game. One was Soul Tyrant, and the other was, Soul Tyrant and then the following phases, and then Broken Vessel / Lost Kin, since it's sort of the same fight. And then also, of course, the third Colosseum challenge. But that brings me into this idea, like, what is difficult? They are so explicit in telling you how to beat them. They don't hide it. They give you very, very obvious tells on what they're about to do. And their move sets don't have so many moves in them that you never know what to expect. It's all very, in some ways, Hollow Knight wants you to win. Like, the Team Cherry is like, here's what to do, like, do it. And in that way, it's not the difficulty of pressing buttons. You don't have to get really good at pressing the joysticks, or if you're like me on like a keyboard-esque device, you just have to get consistent. It's not about getting good. It's about being consistent. The consistent player is the one that's going to win, especially on things like the Colosseum, where each round isn't necessarily difficult, but they're long. Or Soul Tyrant has 3 phases. Each of them are pretty similar, but they're long. It's not about being quote-unquote good. It's about being quote-unquote consistent, which is done by learning slow. Slow is consistent. Consistent is fast. That whole, to misalign a popular musing. The other thing, when you had mentioned difficulty, that I was thinking of, I don't know how you feel about this. I'd be curious to know. There are a lot of folks that love the idea of difficulty sliders because games should be accessible, and I agree. But I think there is something to be said about a team like Team Cherry creating Hollow Knight. And yes, you can argue that the charm system is a mild difficulty slider, but they didn't include a difficulty slider because they had an intended difficulty in mind, and because they're also so good at teaching you exactly what to do. And I think there's something to be said about that, about a developer having this intended experience that they want to pass on to you, not in a sense of like get good, but in a sense of like, this is as true to my creative vision as can be, and I want you to experience that because this is what I intended. I think there are pros and cons on both sides, but Hollow Knight sits more firmly in the latter. And I'm curious, do you prefer that design philosophy over like actual sliders, like Nine Souls, for example?
Well, wading into difficulty discourse, obviously this is a hot potato for a lot of people, but I would say there's nothing lost, I think, if you include difficulty sliders, to just say, yeah, your sword does more damage, you take less damage, go have fun. I have no objection to that if they want to put it in the game. And again, I think, comparing this to Silksong, which is so much harder, there is a degree of like, you are gating out a certain percentage of your audience who's going to nope out and say, like, this is too hard for me. And now I'm going to have to experience this game on YouTube, if at all.
Sure.
And I think that is a problem, because that means, your audience doesn't, or a large percentage of your possible audience doesn't get to see all of the amazing things you did. And I understand the idea of like, well, we only want the best of the best, or like we want it to be really, feel the reward of conquering these challenges. And that said, I think the in-game difficulty slider, again, of adjusting your, building up your character's health, the charm system. Again, the Souls games do this, right? You literally level up your character. You can change out their builds. You can do all kinds of things to try to, basically build yourself up against challenges. But the real challenge in this game, specifically with regards to the boss fights, since that's where really the challenges we're talking about, those are the gates more so than the platforming challenges. it comes down to, as you said, it's pattern recognition. Again, straight up NES design philosophy. This boss has a pattern of moves. You learn them. Whacking the boss with a weapon is less important than being able to master the pattern, because once you master the pattern and you can read it, you can whack away at this thing and never get hit, and that's how you master everything. Right. But when the margins for error on that get smaller and smaller, and the health bar gets larger, meaning the length of time that you have to maintain that level of hit avoidance and all that gets longer. You have to play the game at perfection levels for longer and longer. At some point, that endurance test gets out of whack. And so I'm okay with sliders, putting that back in its place, right? So we haven't talked about the healing system yet here. You basically have an infinite healing system in that you have a set of masks. The number of masks is the number of hits you can take. And you can expand that by earning them throughout the game. But you also have a flask of, soul energy that you replenish by hitting enemies. So if you keep whacking stuff, you will get more health and then you can heal. But the heal animation takes time. And so you have to be able to manage your environment such that you can create the window in which you can successfully heal yourself before getting hit again. And again, if the margins for error on the boss are too small, then, you can whack him, you can build up that soul energy. But if you can't even manage the window to get the heal, then the healing is worthless. So, those things again have to be balanced. And I think in Hollow Knight, they are balanced. I think in Silksong less so. It's tougher. And I can't remember, in Silksong, there's definitely an upgrade that lets makes your heal animation faster, to offset this. I can't remember if the original Hollow Knight has that or not. It's been too long since I've played it.
I think there is one, but I don't remember it being, and I could be totally wrong. I don't remember it being noticeably or game-breakingly fast, so I just never used it. I think you're right, though. I think balance is the key here, and I think the reason that Hollow Knight, at least Hollow Knight, not Silksong, can get away with no difficulty slider is precisely because it's so masterfully balanced between teaching you what to do and giving you the skills to do it. And I think that is astronomically difficult with game design, and I think most games don't even get close to it, which is why games like this that do not only do that so well, but do everything so well, deservedly take the scene by storm. Yeah, with regard to healing, though, there were a lot of times where I simply, because healing does take time, it takes a second, and there are plenty of enemies and bosses that don't give you that. So it becomes far riskier to heal, because yes, you'll heal for one and then they just hit you immediately. It's much more behooving of you to learn the evasive maneuvers, or I can't remember if this is an ability or a charm, but the ability to dash through enemies becomes essentially paramount if you want to take on any of those super tough challenges in the game. Yeah, you're right. It's about the balance. I'd be curious to try Silksong. You were not the first person who has said to me that it is too difficult. In fact, I even heard some folks who were very much anticipating it say yeah, the difficulty just knocked it out of Game of the Year for me. And they fall into that camp, like you said. They're not going to experience what Team Cherry wanted them to, and they're going to resort to watching it on YouTube, which I submit to you, you certainly can with anything. But it's never a satisfying experience, or not as satisfying as, doing it yourself.
Yeah. And I will say, with regards to Silksong's difficulty, because I've, played most of the Souls games, I'm used to you have to kind of get used to this mindset of oh yeah, this thing is going to kill me 40 times before I best it. That's just the price of admission. So it's easier to not get frustrated when you just know this is what's supposed to happen. Yeah, you're gonna beat your head against this thing for a while, but when you beat it, you'll feel like a $1,000,000. Again, how much you want to do that or how much you enjoy doing that is up to you. So, but I don't think that's an issue here. Like I said, there's a few bosses that are particularly tough, especially the final boss is real tough. And so, I personally never even beaten it, but it doesn't diminish this game for me, because if I enjoyed 99% of it and there's just 1% I can't get past, well, that's okay. 99% is a damn good score.
To that point too, there is enjoyment in, well, one, there's enjoyment in always having something more of something you like that you haven't experienced. Like that is such a great feeling, knowing like I love Hollow Knight, but I still have more to go, more to see. Ooh, that's so cool. But there's also enjoyment in exactly what you said, in knowing that the learning process is being taught how to be successful through being shown what is not successful. That is to say, learning how to win by losing. And that's a mindset that's tough for folks, myself included, to get into. And it's why things like fighting games can be so enraging, because truly the only way to get better is to lose, is to be shown by better players what it means to be a good player. And as long as they're not real jerks, you're going to learn how to do that. That's why, like, this game to me, like when folks say it's difficult, and my first thing is like, it's not, you don't have to be good, you just have to be consistent. That's another thing about this game too. And I'm wondering if Silksong still has this balance, is that it's the mindset to have going into it is to embrace the challenge to be better than yourself and not to be better than the game, if that makes sense. It sounds very like abstract and wooey and hippie, but like I think if you go in with the mindset to trounce yourself as the number one challenge, and not, trounce Traitor Lord or the Radiance or whomever, and just seek to learn what you could have done better the last time, which the game isn't shy about showing you. That's how you quote unquote get good. And it's not going to feel like getting good because you're enjoying the process. I don't know. That's kind of adjacent to Hollow Knight, I guess. And it's maybe more of a soapbox than we needed. But I thought about that a lot. This is like classical music in a way. It's not about being the best performer. You just got to get consistent in the fundamentals, be a little bit better than yourself, be aware of what your flaws are, and you're gonna get through the game just fine. Really.
Yeah.
Soapbox over.
Speaking of classical music,
thank you.
Holy moly, is the soundtrack to this game good.
So I have this section in the notes starting out with a quote from Christopher Larkin, the composer, and I want to read it. He says, "The aim for this score was to create a sound world that suggested the departure of a once prosperous kingdom fallen to ruin. A sense of melancholy and dark elegance was essential in creating this world, and we also needed to give it a sense of intrigue and mystery. In terms of the personal side of things, everything I write is in some way a reflection of myself. But I'm also very conscious of crafting the emotional experience the player is ultimately going to have. With that in mind, I'm not always feeling what I'm writing, but I always imagine what I want to feel and what I want other players to feel." End quote. I think this is brilliant for two reasons. One, Larkin had in mind immediately the aesthetic that the narrative and the lore was demanding. Not, this is how I, Christopher Larkin, like to write my commercial jingles. I like this instrument and I like this, lick in this chord. It's not about that. The music serves the narrative, right? Just like it does in the best of opera musical theater, the music serves the story. But two, what I really appreciate about this is that a lot of folks have this misconception that like everything a composer writes, like, it's just about what I'm feeling, man. And this is in the moment, man. This is like, one of those kinds of things. But it's not. It's about the client sometimes, and it's about what the job demands. And having that balance of creativity and understanding that your work is serving something else, though, if you have those two things, you are more set up for success than anything. And not only does Larkin have those two things, he has a phenomenal ability to not just compose, but to also orchestrate. The orchestration in this is just chef's kiss. There's a lot of strings and piano are the two most prominent sounds that you're going to hear. You hear strings a lot for swells and soundscapes, cellos for melodies a lot of the time, and the piano, which is for melody too. But so often the piano is kind of in the background doing these blocks of chord sounds, giving it this percussive sort of feel, which is kind of similar to like a piano behind the orchestra and a piano concerto. And the result is just this massive, massive sound. Even when the music itself feels kind of sparse, like there's not a lot of melody going on, but the sound is huge. And that's not all it is. The music is all very, very varied throughout this. It's brilliant. You led this off by saying it's really, really good. Could you elaborate on that? Like, what did you like about this?
Elaborate? Sure. It's really, really, really good. No, yeah, I mean, as you said, obviously Larkin understood the assignment in terms of what this game's environment and storytelling needs from its musical identity. And it's got a very light touch. You're going to spend a lot of time listening to this music. There isn't an area in the game that's silent. Every area has its own bespoke audio track, and they're all good. This is one of the soundtracks I listen to most in terms of games. Like I will very frequently throw this on while I'm working and have it on in the background. Some of it is threatening. You know, there's certainly the boss themes are obviously going to be more bombastic, but so many of the tracks are just, they're kind of sad but beautiful. They absolutely go again with this tale of like a world that is like, oh, this place used to be really nice, and now it's, you know, filled with acid or whatever. You know, all the buildings are falling apart. And so it's a lot of minor key things, but they're soft in a lot of places. It really is, it serves as a good backdrop because generally what you're doing is there's a lot of action. You're jumping, you're slashing your sword, you're fighting things, you're bouncing around. But the music doesn't come up to meet you there unless it's a boss fight, in which case, yeah, then they crank it up. But the as you said, it's a lot of softer sounds, pianos, woodwinds, strings. Sometimes they use an organ for some of the areas that have a more like religious significance. They kind of bring that in as like what's it called? The soul area. I forget what it's called.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, so for example, we've talked about the White Palace a lot, right? That's the Mesa Core platforming area that does not have Mesa Core platforming music. That has some of the softest, most, you know, tender music in the game. And they know that juxtaposition works really, really well. And so, yeah, like masterful on every level. And that's just the music, the sound design in general is very good for the entire game, including the quote unquote voice acting is all very good.
Yes. Yeah. The one that everybody cites for good reason is the Cornifer's wife. That's the tired wife. That's like, where's my husband?
Bapanada.
It's really good.
So the bugs here, they don't speak English. They speak Buglish, and they don't really speak a lot. Like you get text boxes that show you everything they're saying in English. But what you hear is something like, you know, it's something like that. Yeah. And they're all cute and absolutely adorable. Even like the grumpier characters, like this is where that cartoon stuff comes in, where it's like, you know, you meet a character that should be formidable, but they're still like, you know, they're like that. They're very cartoony, and it adds so much. As does, I think, the fact that you can hear some of them from a ways away, especially the map maker, Cornifer, which the humming I did at the beginning of the episode. You hear that and you're like, oh, good, the map guy's nearby. I can get a map. But you might hear that from, you know, a fairly good distance away, and you can use that to, you know, as a, you know, hot and cold to figure out where you need to go to find him.
Yeah, and that's a godsend sometimes. One of the cool things, something we didn't mention, one of the cool things about the maps that I love a whole lot is that once you have a map, it's not going to give you the map of the whole area. It only charts where you've been, and it will only chart where you've been if you've been onto a bench to rest and save since getting through that area. So it's not like this panacea for, you know, getting around exploration. Back to the music, you had mentioned the woodwinds. One of my favorite things about this soundtrack is Larkin's subtlety with orchestration. There aren't like tons of woodwinds just going all throughout. But when he does add them, like Kingdom's Edge was the example that I wrote down here, you have this beautiful passing of the melody from the piano and strings into the clarinet and I can't remember if it's flute and or oboe, but it's passing along and it results in this really effervescent kind of flowing melody that otherwise in piano and strings would have sounded okay, but adding that new character, that new timbre of another instrument with just fundamentally different bore sizes and overtones and whatnot, it makes it's just so much more expressive, and it adds a new character capital C to each new location. And it's just astoundingly well done. One of the reasons too that I think he's so successful in this is that he doesn't try to compose like, oh, this area is for flute, this area is for clarinet. I didn't write it down, unfortunately, but he, in this interview that I'm going to link in the show notes, he mentions the importance of like humming and singing and whistling while he's composing, which is just a terrific practice to get into in music in general. But because of that, he's composing the music first and adding the orchestral color over top of it, which gives so much more benefit to, or which gives so much more finesse to a lot of what he's doing. It's just really masterful. I kind of like, this soundtrack gets hyped up by the indie community a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that, but like, when a whole community, when the indie community is all like, oh, this is really good, I'm always kind of like, I don't know about that. But this, for good reason, like it is every bit as good as you've heard. Do you have any areas or bosses or just tracks in particular that stood out to you that you really liked?
Yeah, there's a few standouts, quite a few, of course, but I think, the very first track you pretty much hear is when you get to Dirtmouth, which is your hub area, this little village. It's real sad and piano forward, but it's pretty again. And so that one you'll spend a lot of time hearing, and it fits the tone really well. The other one that I really love is Green Path.
Oh, yes.
The first time you walk into Green Path, because you've been in it's one of the early game areas you'll access, but until you get there, things are kind of gray. They're really gloomy. And then you step into this area that's lush and vibrant and verdant. And the music fits that perfectly while still, again, hitting those melancholy notes. A lot of like staccato strings there in that track. And it's one of my favorites. I think it's beautiful.
And if I'm not misremembering too, this is where his orchestration comes in. And please correct me if this is not the right track, but that's where you get the da 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 da. And he's passing it from the flute to the strings to the oboe. I think it's oboe, maybe clarinet. He's passing it through all the different voices, and it gives it like that buoyancy that is, that you kind of see through all the mushroom people in there that are they're nyang around and rolling at you. It's perfect.
Yeah, that might be my single favorite track if I had to pick one. I think, it's intricate. It's interesting. Again, the plucking like harp notes in it, or I don't know if it's a harp, but whatever string instrument is being plucked to give that kind of sound, the backbone of that track. It's really, really special. But there's good ones there. You mentioned Kingdom's Edge, which is good. It's part of the fun of exploration, honestly, is that each time you get to a new area, you've got like each place has a very distinct visual identity as well as a musical and sonic identity. And so it's really cool to get in there and you feel like, oh, I know where I am. I'm in, the mushroom fungal spore zone because of this. Now I'm in this bright pink and purple area, and I know this music and the bubbles and the jellyfish or whatever are like, it all holds together. Each one feels very cohesive aesthetically.
Absolutely. And the music mirrors all the aesthetics beautifully too. Like the way, how did you describe Dirtmouth? Would you say lonely? Or
it's lonely. It's it's just because on a piano. That's most of it, and it's slow. And it's haunting. It lets you know, like, this place it's peaceful, right? You're never going to face any threats here. This is your peaceful, happy hub. But everybody here is, this is a bad place to be. This is like a hobo campfire, basically, in terms of like the story and the tone. Like, this is one of the last few bastions of places in this world that is non-violent.
Oh, right. But I'm glad that you said peaceful as well, because, saying that it's sad is true, but it's not specific. Like, it's not morose. It's not like despairing, but Dirtmouth itself is it's totally barren, but it is peaceful. It feels forgotten in time. So the music is sad, yes, but it's sad in like the nostalgic way, where it's like you're constantly looking back on something. Things just aren't the same anymore. They used to be, but there's loss in the air, and you get a lot of that here. And two, you mentioned I can't remember how you said it, but you mentioned like identities. The Hallownest theme comes all throughout this OST. Anytime you fight any kind of vessel, we're going to talk about the vessels here in a moment when we get into the game stuff. There are several vessel fights like False Knight, Broken Vessel, stuff like that. And that Hallownest theme that represents the vessels, or I guess you could argue it represents the Pale King. I'm not 100% sure. It's distorted. It's present, but it will be distorted or perverted in some way. Broken Vessel's theme is one of my favorites in the entire game. And you hear the intervallic motif from Hallownest, but you just get like in Broken Vessel specifically, you get strings doing tons of like really hard bowing or staccato technique. You get hemiolas, like everything sounds incredibly intimidating and powerful with that one. And then on the other side, you get somebody's theme like Hornet, which might be my favorite in the game. It's so tough to choose. Hornet's got a lot of metric modulation in her theme, which is fitting. And then there's also they use spiccato, which is like when you bounce the bow off of the strings, gives you a very appropriately a bouncy sound. But a lot of the backgrounds are very quick and winding and not quite chromatic, but use a lot of chromatic neighboring tones that kind of like a spider, which if you know Hornet's backstory, very appropriate.
Yeah, Hornet is a spider named Hornet, which is weird. Yeah, and her theme is spunky like she is, right? It's got a little more zip to it. It's got a little more, she's a great character. There's a reason she's the protagonist of the sequel. But like she's really fun. You fight her several times as a boss, even though she is ultimately an ally. But those fights are very acrobatic. She really bounces around the screen a lot, and the music is, in step with that. So yeah, again, hats off to Larkin here on, as you said, every piece of music is perfectly tailored for what is happening on screen in the environment for a boss fight. Like the use of leitmotifs, often very subtly, they're there. This is really expertly done.
So I said the quote-unquote spoiler wall in this episode was going to be a little bit less, what did I say? It's going to be a little less pronounced. It's not less of a big deal, but spoilers aren't really traditional spoilers in this game. So now what I'd like to do is I just want to take that down, if it ever was up in the first place, and talk through some of the lore, some of the game, hit back on any locations or musical identities or themes that we might have missed, any techniques, mechanically or platforming that we might have missed, without you, the listener, having the fear of having anything quote-unquote spoiled, just in case you'd prefer to go in blind. Which, if you can, I think we both 100% would say do.
Oh yeah, I mean, part of the joy of this is having the osmosis of absorbing this story, as you're seeing things, as you're finding things, as you're reading things. Again, even if you can't be Charlie Day, putting all of the thumbtacks and yarn together to do it yourself. I think you want to go in blind as much as possible, because it's that sense of wonder of like seeing this world unfold before you and wondering, like, why is it like this? How did this happen? Who am I in the game doesn't tell you what your role is. You figure that out
right
through fairly late game stuff as to like, what is my character exactly? And what am I doing here? All of those things they bubble up through the course of the game. So while it doesn't tell its story in a traditional linear way, we're probably, when we start getting into the story, going to have to spoil some late game stuff just to even explain what is the deal with Hallownest, what's going on. We would probably have to tell the story starting with some of that stuff, which you don't want to hear if you haven't played it yet.
And that is your cue to jump off now. And I'll talk a little bit more in case you're driving and you want to like veer off the road away from oncoming traffic to press pause. Or if you're making a sandwich, either of those are probably equally as likely. Okay, you're gone now. Great. And I agree, yes. One of the cool things about this game, though, too, is that, remember the quote that we had said from the devs early on, you don't even necessarily have to think about this at all to have a good time in this game. The things are not only like exploration mechanics, platforming, yes, but even the story stuff that's here is visually and aesthetically so exciting that you don't even have to think about this. You could get to the very end and just be pleased by the act of playing it in the hands and seeing all this evocative imagery, and that's cool. But if you want to know what's going on, here's a quick and dirty rundown. There was this old world god named the Radiance. The Moths worship the Radiance. This worm, W-Y-R-M, comes onto the scene, and out from it is birthed the Pale King. The Pale King desires worship above all else, so he builds Hollow Nest and grants bugs in it sentience. Everybody worships him. The moths begin to worship him too. This does not sit well with the old god, the Radiance, which is why the infection happens. There is this infection all throughout Hollow Nest that is taking over not just the land, but the minds of the bugs as well. The Pale King, along with the White Lady, create what's called the vessels. That's our little guy. All of the vessels look like our little guy. Our little guy is a vessel too. Once a pure vessel, quote unquote, is chosen, it's used to absorb the radiance into itself, and then that vessel with the radiance inside is sealed inside what's called the black egg by the Dreamers, which are 3 powerful bugs that were chosen to do this role. They seal it in, they sleep forever. The vessel is not pure, however, so the radiance influences it, begins to spread the infection, takes over the minds of bugs, and this is where we come in. Your guy, and this is not expressed at the beginning of the game, your guy is going to essentially complete his deterministic fate, or instinct, if you want to think of it that way, because they're bugs. You're going through, destroying the Dreamers to get into the black egg, to destroy the vessel, and then you take its place, containing the radiance, because in all of that, it is truly you that are hollow of mind and will and desire. It's very cool because like it does have this deterministic bent to it, or instinctual bent to it, because your fate was decided from the start. There is no world in which you save the world and become a hero. That was never part of the plan for you. You were created for a purpose. But then again, I wrote that and I said, perhaps this is not the case, because we are not the Hollow Knight. We've been saying the Knight, or little guy in my case, all throughout. The Hollow Knight was the pure vessel, which ended up being impure. And that is the final boss of the quote unquote first 2 endings. So when you destroy the Hollow Knight as the Knight, maybe that is indicating that, it is not us that is hollow. And perhaps it is precisely that your drive and will and self-actualization allows you to succeed in what, could be called an altruistic self-sacrifice. Or you could take the more cynical route and say, no, this is all just actually furthering the Pale King's ambitions. You are just the most hollow. You don't have any self-actualization going for you. It was always going to end this way. You're just carrying out fate. It opens up a whole conversation. And this isn't even like in-depth stuff. This is like the skeleton of the lore. It's very cool. And it's all there for you to explore and discover if you want to. So many layers, man. So many layers.
As you said, that's kind of the skeleton, right? And this is what you discover really late in the game. You go into this area called the Abyss, way at the bottom of Hollow Nest, where the Pale King was making all of these vessels. And it's just like the entire floor of it is failed vessels, just empty shells of little guys that look just like you. And when you go into the White Palace, we haven't talked about this yet, but this, you end up getting this upgrade called the Dream Nail. Which is like your sword is a nail, which is cute, right? You're a bug. You're using a nail as a weapon.
Right. Right.
The Dream Nail is a dreamy version of this because the radiance spreads through people's minds and dreams, which is why in the story you need a truly hollow, brainless vessel to contain it, because if you don't have any thoughts of your own, the radiance can't get out and do anything. And when you see the flashbacks when you use the Dream Nail, you can access the dreams basically of ghosts, of sleeping people, You can also use it to view the inner thoughts of NPCs. You whack them with it, and then you can get a little like bubble, which is why I was telling you as you were playing this, I'm like, oh, once you get it, go use it on everything. You can use it on enemies. You can, sometimes you get interesting stuff out of using the dream nail on things. And so to get to the White Palace, you find this area where you find kind of what is left of the Pale King, and you use the dream nail to enter his dreams, which is the White Palace platforming challenge. And through that, you see little flashbacks of this little guy that looks like you hanging out with the Pale King. That is the Hollow Knight you will ultimately fight at the end of the game. And I think what I gathered from kind of researching this is the idea that the reason the Hollow Knight is impure is that he does have a thought in his head. He's not supposed to. And that thought is to please the Pale King, and he wants to do a good job at his job. That is enough.
They had a bond.
Yeah, they bond.
Right.
And that is enough to make him impure for this particular task that he's supposed to do. The game really wants you to think about this idea of, like, again, dreaming and thought and sentience as this backdrop. That's why I was sending you text saying maybe you should watch The Secret of Nim, which is an animated movie about a bunch of rats. They have a kind of like a hollow nest. They have like this nest in the ground, and they were given sentience by NIM, the National Institute of Mental Health. They were given a drug that made them into sentient rats. And so they have this whole society down there. And I don't know if it's a direct influence on this, but it seems like there must be. But kind of getting back to the main point of this story, you didn't get to the final ending because one possible ending is, again, you fight the Hollow Knight and you take his place to contain the Radiance. If you do all of the special stuff, you can then you use the Dream Nail to enter the Hollow Knight's mind and fight and hopefully destroy the Radiance there permanently. And you're dealing with a force there called the Void.
Yeah, I was hoping that you would bring this up because I'm still a little unclear on what exactly this is, but it plays a huge role in this third ending.
Yeah, the Void is it's basically what is inside your character and the Hollow Knight. It's this black substance. It's like essentially darkness incarnate in a way. Like the Radiance is, hey, guess what? Moths are drawn to the light. They're kind of playing with that idea. The Void is the opposite. Yeah. It's this abyssal force of like nature, essentially, that the Pale King was trying to harness because it can put the darkness there could potentially contain the light of the Radiance. And that force, it has a big role to play in Silksong as well. Like it's like, it can't. The idea again, I think, is to get Radiance to a point where the abyss contains it, or the Void contains it permanently, instead of just trying to like put a Band-Aid on it by keeping it trapped inside the Hollow Knight. Again, I will say I am not an expert on this shit by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm sure somewhere there's someone on the wiki going like, he's so wrong. But that's okay. This is, again, your goal is to try and absorb this through the game as best you can. So I am fully comfortable admitting I may be dead wrong on some of the details here, but generally that's what's going on. But that's the macro story. Like the micro story of this game is also great. You meet all of these different factions within the world and all these different NPCs. And that's mostly what you experience going through it. It's like, I got to the Mantis village where all the weird Mantis people are. I, found, you find these different NPCs that are on various quest lines that you talk to them in different locations throughout the map. And each one of those is, kind of really charming and entertaining on its own.
Yeah. And there sure are a lot of colorful characters, both malicious and kind to you. That's for sure. You had mentioned you had mentioned putting a Band-Aid over the Radiance. That's why a lot of people, I think, look at ending 1, which is the ending most people are going to get on their first time through, unless they're following a guide. Ending 1 is just called the Hollow Knight, because in this ending, you get into the Black Egg, you defeat the Hollow Knight, who has been taken over in mind and spirit and body by the Radiance. You defeat him, but then you absorb the Radiance into yourself. So you are now the new vector in which the Radiance sits, and you are then sealed inside of the Black Egg. Now, whether this is to protect Hallownest further, forevermore, or just until it takes over you, that's to be seen. That is considered the quote-unquote bad ending. I don't think Team Cherry has said all of these are canon, which means anything you want. One of them kind of can't be, I don't think, if Hornet is the protagonist in Silksong.
Yeah, there's one ending where Hornet's trapped in there with you, which obviously prevents Silksong from happening. So that can't be it.
Yeah, that's the second ending. I think Sealed Siblings, I think it's called. It plays out the exact same, but if you have a special item, Hornet will come in and help you. There's this sort of moment where you can get into the third ending, but if you don't dream nail the Hollow Knight and you take too much time, Hornet, it's unclear. It looks like Hornet's either knocked out or killed, and then it plays out the same, but with her inside there with you. And her little crest appears on the black egg, just like the Dreamers did, because she is technically half Dreamer, if you think about it.
Yeah, I would say we haven't really talked about Hornet much. She's a big part of the story that, you meet her, you fight her along the way. She is Princess Hornet. Her father is the Pale King. Her mother is one of the Dreamers, who we'll find out, in the sequel, is from Farloom, where the sequel takes place, which is where she goes off to in the second one. She has a much better idea of what's going on here. So she'll often come in, she'll taunt you, or eventually she'll try and explain to you, like, look, what you're doing is bad. Don't do this. Or, you need to do this instead of that. Like she's trying to guide you ultimately towards where she thinks things need to go, because she's also trying to save Hallownest in her own way.
Yeah, she's got her own ambitions, and it's unclear at first when you find her if she is friend or foe. I mean, one, your character design, your little skull, it's very cute. You got the big eyes, you've got big rounded ears, big rounded cheeks, and kind of cute. You look cute is what I'm saying. Hornet is more angular and slender. So, and she looks foreboding. And I mean, the first thing she does when you see her, she throws her spear at you, her needle, which by the way, I think that's so cool that she fights with needle and thread as a spider. But the first thing she says to you is, "Come no closer, ghost. I've seen you creeping through the undergrowth, stalking me. This old kingdom, a terrible thing awakens. I can smell it in the air. I know what you are. I know what you'd try to do. I can't allow it." So she knows a little more than you. She knows that you seek to destroy the Dreamers to get into the black egg. What we don't know is why she doesn't want that to happen. Is she malevolent? Does she just not think that we can do it? What's going on here? But the more you encounter her throughout the game and fight her fights are great, the more you learn that she is not your enemy. Not really.
No, yeah, exactly. You fight her a few times, and then after that, she starts giving you more helpful advice. She helps you, and as you said, she comes in the final boss fight with the Hollow Knight to whack him a few times and help, and she disables him. At which point, you can either hit him with the Dream Nail and go for ending 3 if you have the items you need to make that happen,
right?
Or you just continue fighting the Hollow Knight until you get that other version of the base ending.
That ending with her is very cool too. You get to talk to her a little bit outside, and if you use the Dream Nail on her, I didn't write down what she says, but she says something to the effect of like, does this shade really have like what it takes? Are they able to conquer what is in there? Like finally having this moment of acceptance. And she's also like, don't expect me to go in there with you. Like, this is your fight, buddy. Maybe I'll help if the moment arises. Like the kind of like tsundere thing. She is very cool. I have her, you encounter her in Green Path, I believe, is the first time. I think I had it incorrectly in here as Fungal Wastes, but that is another area of the game that's like I think it's right near Green Path, the Fungal Wastes. That's where the Mushroom Clan is, and the Mantis Clan. Oh, speaking of the lore, this is stuff that I just looked up today. I totally forgot about it. The Mantis Clan is pretty sweet. They were, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, they were like when the Pale King took over, the Mantises said that they would, worship him if they could just have the whole lower area down here to themselves. And the Pale King was like, okay, fine, you worship me, and then you can just have all that there. And, they protected their village with pride to the point where, one, if you defeat them in the game, the Mantises will never attack you again unless you strike first, which feels very bad to do it by accident, because they'll otherwise just bow to you. But two, as you leave for the first time after you defeat the 3 Mantis Lords, you see corpses everywhere, just littered with spears, because they protected their area of the kingdom. Little storytelling elements like that, like let's all say the phrase environmental storytelling. There we go, popular one. I mean, that's here in spades. And this is where a lot of the lore comes from. It's little subtle touches like this. It's not like, you don't get an exclamation point, press X, and your codex gets updated. It's this is why Mossbag said at the time of recording his video that folks have been doing this for like 5 years, just going around meticulously taking notes to figure out what the heck is going on. It's really detailed. Apologies to everybody if this comes off as a bit, what's the word? Not frazzled, but sort of, well, to use what you said, Doug, Charlie. Oh, I was going to say Charlie Day at the board with the, Pepe Sylvia. Sorry if it comes off that way. There's just so much to talk about,
Yeah, I mean, it is very dense in terms of lore in a way that we're never going to be able to even come close to touching like 5% of this. There's we haven't talked about the City of Tears, which is like that was the capital city of Hallownest. You eventually make your way there and you see what, again, guess what? It's not in a good state.
No.
And there's the areas you find where they were doing the black science to try and figure out a way around the corruption, where they're manipulating things. And there's all kinds of ways in which you see kind of the degradation of the society as they tried to stave off what was happening. And all of it's cool. And yet they still find time for plenty of like whimsy and humor throughout it, which is what really, again, makes that tone work, where, it's bleak, but there's still all of these bright spots that make it more, that fit the cartoon style, to keep that just a touch of lightness in there. But we should get to I should say it's the third ending, but the DLC adds more endings. But basically you go into the dream with the Hollow Knight, you fight the Radiance, which is a big old bullet hell boss fight. And if you do that, then the Void takes the Radiance. But it's the Void that's inside of you, I think. So like you burst open.
Yes.
You're basically, I said, you're a vessel. That's what you do. You contain this Void substance. And so you let it out. We should say whenever you die, in this game, like what Dark Souls would do is if you die, you would leave a soul on the ground. Basically, there's just a spot in the game. You make your way back to it. You press the button and you get your soul back and all of the stuff you lost when you died. Here, instead of just finding the place where you died, there's actually a little shade version of you floating around. You have to fight it. You have to whack it a few times. That's what's inside of you, is this ghostly version of you, this dark, kind of mirror image. And so when you fight the Radiance, that is what bursts open from inside of you and basically engulfs the Radiance and destroys it that way. And then there's these two endings in the DLC where like it's even more dramatic, but still functionally the same thing happens, that the Radiance is completely subsumed by the Void.
Yeah, that ending too. And, I did not get the third ending. I just checked it out before starting this recording. When you turn into your shade version, the Void version, the Hollow Knight comes in as well as their shade Void version. And how to phrase this? It is as badass as I think this game can look. Like if we're using badass in a badass kind of way, it looks pretty sick. It looks it's kind of the same vibe you get whenever Sora in Kingdom Hearts 2 turns into the anti-form for the first time, where you just get this really edgy kind of looking malicious thing with claws, and it's like, whoa, where did this come from my cute little guy? That ending is nice too, because once that happens, the black egg completely disappears and Hornet is just laying there alone. She wakes up, and what does she see? She just sees the knight's skull cracked in twain, and implying that you're dead. But after that, actually, I'm not sure, Doug, I wonder if you could clear this up for me. After that, your guy, you take out Radiance, you and the Hollow Knight both, you take out Radiance, the infection's over, Hornet wakes up, you're gone, the black egg's gone, your mask is there. Then all the shades, it shows the shades start to disappear. I've heard folks say online that this is them just going about to do whatever they want. They're no longer sort of under any obligation or spell. I read it as them just disappearing, like they can finally rest. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I interpret it roughly that way. That, again, remember they are basically built out of the Void. The Pale King is creating beings out of this elemental substance, and without without the Pale King there anymore to do that, with you're the last of these shades, right? You fight a few guys that are kind of like you here and there, but basically you're it. Then the rest of these shades can now kind of they go back to the Void from whence they came, and rejoin it. which is consonant with some of the things that will come up in Silksong. Not to spoil anything, but obviously the void is an elemental force of this fictional world, so not really a spoiler to say that it does appear in some form in that game. I think this is now Hallowness kind of returning to like its baseline at peace. The Radiance is gone. The Pale King is gone. These bugs can now go about their business happily. So to the extent there is a happy ending, that's what it is. It's not a happy ending for your character. You cease to exist, but you have saved the world.
Right. Yeah. That sort of self-sacrifice is happening on some level, regardless of the endings. Now, I will say I haven't watched the DLC ones. I think 4, 5, and 6.
So I'll talk about those because I did watch them. So functionally, what happens to Radiance is roughly the same. It's taken down by the force of the void. It looks different for reasons that I'm not familiar with because it stuff that happens in that DLC I haven't seen. But there are two things that happen at the end of those. One is we see Hornet again. She wakes up by this crater where the black egg used to be, and she turns around to be menaced by something, and then it cuts to black. Which makes sense with where Silksong picks up. She's been kidnapped and taken to the new labyrinth that will be the basis of the new game. So we can assume that this is the moment where she is kidnapped by those beings. And then they do a little thing. If there's this whole quest with this talking mushroom, that if you do the whole thing, you'll also get this post-credits thing where you see the mushroom like flying overhead like a comet, and then it just says like to be continued. They do.
Oh, wow.
It's really goofy looking. I've never done this, but yeah, that is something that they put into the game. They also do it in Silksong as well. There's the mushroom people you can do this with. But that's the only other extra little thing. Functionally, the story ending is roughly the same, even in I think it's called the Godmaster DLC that adds this. Mm-hmm. But yeah, still, Radiance is destroyed.
So we kind of did jump to the ending, and again, we're not going to talk about the lore beginning to end, but to get to the ending, to get into the black egg, you do have to go through all of the dreamers and take them down. Now, the first time, I actually remember messaging you after I did the first one. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to destroy them. And the way that they're set up kind of vague insofar as you don't really know whether they're hostile or not. When you finally find the first one, I would imagine most folks are going to find the Beast's Den, Hera, first, because it is the most accessible to get to. But when you find them and you go into their like dream world with the dream nail, you can quote unquote talk to them. They don't fight you. You still have to kill them, but they don't fight back. And I remember when I did that, I messaged you. I was like, why would they make me do this? I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to. I actually, the first time, I left the dream entirely and just walked away because I was like, they're not attacking. I don't know what I guess I find something outside. But no, you have to take them down. Otherwise, you can't get into the black egg. But they're fascinating too, because each of the dreamers, Hera, the Beast, Monomon, the Teacher, and Lurien the Watcher, right? Lurien's the last one?
I believe that's right.
Each of them had like a different stance on this whole thing. None of them volunteered, I don't think, to be dreamers. Like the Pale King just said, hey, I need 3 powerful bugs, let's go. Hera the Beast's backstory, aka Hornet's mom, didn't really have, like, she didn't really have a stake in this whole thing. Her quote unquote husband, I think sire is how the wiki refers to him, had died and said, okay, I'll be a dreamer if you have a child with me, which turned out to be Hornet. I can't remember, Lurien and Monomon, one of them was opposed and one of them was for sealing the vessel. I don't remember which, but they each had like their own separate agenda, or agenda is not the right word, their own separate ideals and philosophies behind all of this. And that's kind of reflected in how you get to them and what they say to you before you kill them as well. It's really cool. Hera is in the Beast's Den, which is like this huge, and which makes sense, she was a spider. It's in this huge spider's web den. The way that you get there was very fascinating. You encounter these vessels that look pretty similar to you, and they're just like, sit on this bench. They're just surrounding the bench. Go ahead, sit. You're tired. Sit down. Must be tough. Go ahead and sit. And you're like, I know what's coming. You sit down. They wrap you up. Very, very cool. I loved this. The only one that I had a lot of trouble getting to was I think it was Lurian. I think it's Lurian. It's the one that you get to from City of Tears. I don't quite remember.
It's been a little while. I don't remember the exact details of where the dreamers are. You can see them on the map. There's just like an icon for where the 3 dreamers are. But
which is another reason you think they might be bosses and they might be hostile towards you.
Yeah, they're not. You get to them at the end of other kinds of challenges to eventually reach them. And as you said, you have to do this mercy killing. And it's a little bit like if you play Final Fantasy X, right? This like idea of like, I'm stuck having to dream this in this state forever and ever until I'm released from this. So they're again, another melancholy thing in a game full of melancholy stuff. As you mercy kill these creatures to break their hold over the egg. They are interesting lore wise. You get bits of them. You can find other like lore important, like not quite deities, but deity-ish characters like the Queen, the White Lady. There's what's the thing like or something? It's like a giant slug. Like these other like these kind of like primordial beings that are there to teach you about the world. Like think that moment in the Neverending Story where he encounters the gigantic turtle. And it's like, oh, here's a being that's like older than the world that's here to, kind of tell me what's going on. And you can start building out your sense of the lore from speaking to them. But they're all of these things. They're not, I wouldn't call them a set piece, but they are these big kind of wow moments whenever you encounter one of these types of beings.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I've never seen the Neverending Story.
Ooh.
I know.
Well, you've missed the chance to have your childhood traumatized, sir, by the death of Artax, but that's okay.
I only know that it's like the boy on the dragon Atreyu or something, right? Is the boy Atreyu?
Well, there's 2 boy characters. There's the boy in the real world reading the book, and then inside the book, the boy protagonist is Atreyu. Yes. And he rides the luck dragon Falkor.
Falkor, that's right. Okay, I know some stuff about it. Melancholy is a great way to describe this, but it's like no matter where you go, like you had mentioned City of Tears. Let's talk about City of Tears for a second. No matter where you go in Hallownest, melancholy is the overriding emotion that you might feel through the air. Like melancholy is in the air. It's thick. But plenty of the smaller folks that you run into, the colorful creatures, even the larger ones, like I don't know if Unda is a great example of this. I don't actually quite really remember. I know I did run into them. I just don't remember where. But a lot of them still maintain sort of good humors throughout all of this, which makes it less like not a depressing slog. That's not how I want to describe it. Less of a constant barrage of depression and despair like you might find in some games like, I don't know, The Last of Us maybe, or Lisa the Painful. And it's more keeping spirits as high as you can in dark times, I guess. That's not really a great way to describe it. But City of Tears. This place is very cool because of how it's designed. It's designed as almost sort of like a Gothic manor in a way. Like, I don't know, I'm not very good at talking about architecture. You have a lot of like pointed fence-esque architecture. There are spikes, like those decorative spikes coming off of the ceiling, or not the ceiling, the roof of the awnings of the building. I'm really poor at talking about this stuff.
No, I know what you mean. Like it has a little more of a modern look to it in terms of the buildings and the architecture, right? This is like I said, it's the capital city. It's going to have the most fine architecture, the most modern looking things, and there is a real cohesion to like the design aesthetic, to the way like the bugs have built their society. And what's the other neat thing is it's underneath a lake. This underground lake.
Yes.
So it's called the City of Tears because water from the lake is constantly leaking through. So it's always raining in there. So it really adds to such a great atmospheric area of the game where you'll spend a lot of time. But as you said, like the characters themselves are not as morose as you would expect, which really helps, not just in City of Tears, but everywhere. So like you go to Crystal Peak, for example, which is this like again this big mine in the mountains where they were mining crystals for plot reasons, and it's one of the first places you go, but you can't get very far. You need an upgrade item, but before you get to like this the choke point, there's a little guy who's like picking away with a pickaxe, and like they couldn't be more cheerful. And it's cool because it's like the cheeriness offsets the melancholy, but not entirely, because you still get a sense of like, oh, this poor bug is so deluded. They don't know.
Right.
You know, they're just happy to keep doing their thing. And the bugs that have gone hollow, to again, borrow a Dark Souls thing, the one that have lost their minds to the radiance and the infection, like they're still sort of doing their thing, right? So like the soldier bugs are still they're just marching back and forth because that's that's all they do now until you come in and kill them for in-game currency.
I can't remember if this is the same bug, but one of the bugs that's mining for crystal, I don't think it's like right in Crystal Valley or Crystal Peak, but as the game goes forward, they start to lose their mind as the infection begins to continue to take over. And that's one of the cool things, like jumping back to City of Tears as well, is that yes, there are a lot of minor characters that keep their spirits high in their own ways throughout all of this, but it doesn't mean that it ends well for them. City of Tears is a cool example because you had mentioned it's the capital. It was the most affluent city. And what happened when the infection started, they sealed themselves off because they were the higher society. They wanted to make sure they were safe, keep all the pores out and keep the infection out. And we're going to be okay in here. They surrounded and hoarded themselves on their wealth like Smaug. And what ended up happening was they got infected anyway. I think the lore says they eventually resorted to cannibalism because lack of food, and the sealing of the gates proved to be in vain as the entire city became infected. So they tried to keep themselves in good humors by using their wealth to seal everything off. We're in a fortress now, and we are among our own. We're good, and look how that befell them. A fitting moral a fitting parable if there ever was one for 2026, if you ask me. But you see that all throughout here.
I mean, nobody gets out, right? Nobody gets out unscathed here. The only place that's even close to Dirtmouth is Dirtmouth because it's on the surface. But at a certain point in the game, the infection spreads. So like the very first area you go into, the Forgotten Crossroads, right? That's when you go after the introductory area, you go into Dirtmouth and then down this well to the Forgotten Crossroads. That becomes infected at a certain point. So like late game Forgotten Crossroads is much more dangerous than it used to be. And it's this way of the game saying like, it's not all archaeological. There's present tense decay happening here. And that you have to be kind of wary of. Yeah, there isn't an area in the game that's quote unquote unscathed. Even like the Colosseum, which is way kind of near the top of the world. It's got kind of a Mad Max quality to it, to the extent that this game can give you that sense. This is all the like bugs basically, doing gladiatorial combat for fun, so like everything about society has decayed.
That infection coming out too is very cool. It starts to the world gets more infected with each dreamer you take down because the black egg is seeping, right? It makes sense. That was a huge like, oh my gosh moment for me. After we should mention
the black egg is in the Forgotten Crossroads. It's in the very first area you go to in the game. It's right there.
Yeah, the game is elliptical in that way. It ends where it started. Always a very cool touch for me. Before we do end for the day, though, you had alluded to this way back. I think before we even started talking about lore stuff. But I want to talk about the Abyss and the scene where you get to see the Hollow Knight, quote unquote, chosen, because this was one of the last things that I did before. The actual last thing I did before this recording was the White Palace, which was awesome. Or no, I think you have to do this.
You have to do the Abyss to get to the White Palace. Yeah.
Okay. The Abyss is a very powerful moment because the Abyss itself is a total. I mean, it's foreboding. It's littered with the bones and skulls of failed vessels. It's hard to overstate how many there are. Hundreds, thousands. And you're walking through their remains, and you find once you have a special charm, you're able to go deep underground where all of these shades are at this time hostile, and you find your birthplace, and it's a very moving scene because then when you come out, you sort of have this quasi flashback of ascending from the very bottom, the depths of all of these bones and skulls and masks, and you're climbing up, And one thing that's brilliant about Larkin's score, or whoever placed the score throughout here, is it will indicate when you're going the right way, because this is a massively high ascent out of the abyss. And there are, branching platforms if you want to get treasure or whatever. And as you go up, more and more of the choir and the orchestration fills out, and you get these quotes across the screen from the Pale King saying like, no mind to think, no will to break, things like that. And the music is just swelling, and it's incredibly emotional. You get to the top, and the scene kind of ends. It takes control away from you as your knight is sort of holding on to this the edge that leads into the pit of the abyss. And the Hollow Knight, capital H, capital K, is walking out of the door following the Pale King because he's been chosen. And as you're hanging there, it occurs to you, this isn't now, like this very well could be a memory. The Hollow Knight looks back at you once and then just keeps walking by. So all without, well, you get some dialogue from the Pale King, but all without any extra dialogue, you're learning that this is your sibling. You are learning that there was some kind of, you at least acknowledged each other, and that you were discarded, and that the Hollow Knight looked back at you and without a second thought just kept going. It's a terrific way to narrate a sort of a really tragic character and a really tragic fate without using a lick of dialogue. It's a really moving scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in this entire game. And it's, you know what the kicker is? Totally optional. You might never even come upon it.
Yeah, I think my first playthrough, I got into the abyss, but I didn't go all the way down into that lower area where you find your birthplace, which is important, like story-wise, to get all the way down there. And like it tells you so much, like, because the first thing you see in the game is this cutscene of your guy, the knight, standing on the edge of, looking over where Dirtmouth is, basically, and walking into it. And so you don't know how you got there or where you were before. And what you learn here is, you crawled all the way out of the abyss and up what's basically the left side of the map, to where there's this kind of like more wind-swept open area that's above ground. And that's how you got in. And it lets you realize, like, that's all, you are empty. Like, all you did is you had this instinct to just go up. And so you went to this place. And it helps you catch back up with, okay, now I know where I was at the beginning of the game, and my role here for a character that is, it's a silent protagonist role here. They do so much in terms of characterization. I think it's really, really pretty good, because usually I'm not the biggest silent protagonist fan. I usually find that a little strange and awkward to keep working. Why doesn't he say anything? But this character, there's a plot reason for him not to say anything. He is an empty vessel.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm playing through Chrono Cross right now, and I just do not like silent protagonists in any kind of narrative story. But it works here, largely because of how the storytelling is structured and told. The story doesn't even necessarily have to be engaged with. It just works all over. And as you said, you are just a vessel, which does, you can recognize that. You recognize that you don't speak. You recognize that the Hollow Knight doesn't speak outside of like screams. The Pale King speaks and Hornet speaks. Is that just because she's part dreamer? Unclear, but it does differ. It's a pretty clear indication that there's something special about Hornet, which is, why it's so great that she is the protagonist of Silksong. Because I am personally invested into seeing what's going on with her and how that story ends, or even like what her ambitions were/are. They're never like it made explicitly clear, as far as I know, in Hollow Knight.
Yeah, spoiler alert, they're good at that. And Silk, that is, a highlight of Silksong is you spend a lot of time with her, and she is chatty. So when her dialogue pops up, she talks back to the NPCs and says things, and her very spunky, forceful voice throughout that is really well realized, and you get to know a lot about her through her separate adventure.
Well, there's a lot of lore still left to uncover. There's a lot of lore that I think we talked about in here. I am going to link a few things in the episode description that I think will be of use to all of you lore hounds. Mossbag's video, of course. Your mileage may vary with the way he does humor, but it is exhaustive. Mossbag also, I found this online, has the entire script of Hollow Knight out there. I read through a bunch of it. It is the entire script, though, of the entire game. Pretty incredible. It's in a Google Doc that I'm going to link in there, too, along with some of the other stuff we mentioned, like Kirk Hamilton's interview with Team Cherry. They did an AMA on Reddit around the time that this came out on the Switch. Lots of very cool stuff online. Oh, and of course, an interview with Christopher Larkin. How could I forget? For fear of getting a bit too long in the tooth and a bit too more muddled than the game wants you to feel, I think, because I do think it is intentional going through this lore. Doug, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we wrap this puppy up? I think I hit all of the major things that I was excited about, but if I missed something that moved you, let's talk about it.
Man, I can't think of much. We've covered most of the things on the map that are of significance. There's all kinds of interesting set pieces, like when you come across, say, the Pale King's like worm form, like the shell of that's a great moment. All the stuff at Kingdom's Edge and up the side of that side of the map is really cool. Deep Nest, the scary dark place where you find I forget which of the basically the spider.
Nosk, and he appears as your doppelganger. I didn't chase this. Like, I forget. I was distracted by something else in Deep Nest that I found. I think that's how I found Ancient Basin, and then I just went through there. But Nosk is like a spider that mimics its prey, so it's trying to lure you in, and has one of the coolest tracks in the game. And the reason I like that track so much is because like the melodic content, like the melody, the stuff that you and I could sing right now, isn't very interesting. Like, in fact, I don't think it's very good. The cool thing is how the instruments are playing and the extended techniques they're using to make noise that makes it sound like this rabid, frantic spider acting on instinct. It's so cool, dude. I want to go back and fight Nosk, though, because looks very scary.
Yeah, I also want to shout out Dung Defender as a fun boss. Who's this big, dopey knight who, he's a dung beetle and he rolls around and stuff and has some of the funnier vocalization. So I just wanted to shout that out because I think people will be like, well, you didn't mention Dung Defender. He's so neat. So yeah, there's too much to cover. I think we've hit enough of the highlights to say that we've done a fair enough job of doing an episode on this game, but there is a whole lot more that we didn't get to that, that's up to you now to go play it and find it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can say with certainty that Silksong will be on the show eventually. That ultimately that just comes down to when I can play it and who wants to join me. As for the DLC for this, not sure. I mentioned this recently in the Discord and on the social medias. I have started a free blog on the Patreon, and it's entirely possible I might just write something about the DLC for Hollow Knight as I go through it, for free for anybody to read. If you're interested, I might do that. And until then, until that blog comes out, until we do Silksong, I think we're going to wrap up on our discussions around the history and the lore of Hallownest, the adventures of the Knight and Hornet, and all involved adjacent to and directly with their quest. So, Doug, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad you picked this game because it is easily, like, I don't want to quantify it with a number, but let's just throw out top 20 for sure of all time. I love this game. But, Doug, you aren't just an enjoyer of good Metroidvanias. Turns out that you're a podcaster, and you've got two of them. I don't know if you want to plug both of them, but I mentioned them up top, Nostalgium Arcanum, as well as Pages of Play. And if you wanted to talk about what either or both of those are, go ahead, because they're good shows.
Sure. So I actually have 3 podcasts going now.
Still Muppeting. That's right.
Yeah. So the primary show, the flagship show is Nostalgium Arcanum. I know the spelling is totally ridiculous, but Rick will put a link to it in the show notes so you can find it. Nostalgium Arcanum is a pop culture retrospective show where each week we have a guest on to talk about a piece of media or maybe a person or a phenomenon, whatever it is that they are super nostalgic for and want to, the kind of thing that they haven't shut up about since the thing came out 30 years ago. That's the topic. So whatever it is, it's often movies, games. Like I said, we've done like stand-up comedians and things like that. So we're closing in on 200 episodes now. So there's going to be something in there you like. Rick has graciously come on the show a few times. We had him on to talk about Final Fantasy IX, and last year for Halloween we did the Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead, which was fun. My second show is called Playing by Ear. That is a music podcast I do every other week with my wife and my brother-in-law, where we take an album and break it down track by track. And again, Rick was kind enough to drop by to cover Goths by the Mountain Goats, so that's a good place to start. And then the last show is that's a Patreon show called Still Muppeting that I do with my friend, another podcaster, Josh Koval, over at Still Loading. So if you go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod, you can listen to us do a Jim Henson show once a month. So we're mostly working our way through the various Jim Henson movies. So I think I'm not sure when this comes out. I think, is it March or February?
This Hollow Knight?
Yeah.
Less than 7 days.
Oh, okay, great. So by the time you're hearing this, you're pretty soon you're about to hear our episode on the Great Muppet Caper, if it's not out already. If not, our most recent episode was on, we picked an episode of The Muppet Show so it's represented. So Josh picked the particular episode of The Muppet Show where James Bond or Roger Moore was the guest. But we're mostly going through Jim Henson movies in chron order. So you can go find that for over at, like I said, patreon.com/stillloadingpod.
Yeah, man. Thank you. It was a lot of fun to do both of those shows. I had forgotten all about Final Fantasy IX. I have not forgotten about Freddy's Dead. That's a wild movie. I had a lot of fun talking with all of you about Goths. That was a really fun show to do, where I inadvertently was the lowest scorer among an album that I think I liked more than anybody else. But so it goes. Yep. That was a ton of fun. You can check out all of those shows by going into the description and clicking the relevant links that you'll see in there. You can find Doug on socials as well, which you can see in the episode description. And you can find all of our stuff too. The free Discord, the social medias on Blue Sky and Instagram, as well as the Patreon, where you can find the free blog, or you can join to get extra episodes and other goodies like that. So with that, Doug, thank you once again. This was a really fun, really dense episode and game. I'm very glad that we did it. Listeners, new and old, thank you for sticking around. And I hope you loved the show today, as I hope you love it every day. We're signing off for now. My name's Rick, your host as always. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.